Hello. Okay, this episode we actually wanted to extend on the last one. The last one we had Roberto Blake on as our special guest, and he talked about quite a few interesting things. Actually, we always joke every time we see Roberto that we're about to be in for his TED Talk. It's like Roberto's TED Talk because he has like so many great opinions, and he he's so articulate in the way that he shares them. So if you missed that episode with Roberto last week, definitely go back and check it out, because I wanted to use this episode with Bonner to actually pull on one of the threads, I guess, that he kind of weaved in that episode. And it's really around the question I asked him, which is like, what does value actually mean to him, giving value? Because that's what... that was a big thing of obviously what he was talking about, was like we have to be giving value. That's actually what our audience is looking for. We hear that in, I think, definitely I know Alex Hormozi, which you follow him and Layla. He really popularized the whole just give everything. Literally, yes. Whatever people would pay you for, just give it, and they'll actually pay you more for more things, right? And so this whole concept of like giving value and just giving has really become, I would almost say it's like kind of like the trend in entrepreneurship these days. And so, but what I really wanted to dig into was almost what that actually means and looks and tastes and smells, and when you touch it, what does it feel like? Because it's sometimes easy to say value, but value means so many things to so many different people. So I'm really excited to dig into that conversation. Hello.
We're back.
All right. Okay. So I want to talk about this concept of value because I think value has become the way, like if we can give value to our audience, that's the way that we can almost, from a sort of dollars and cents perspective, that's how we can extract value from our audience by way of, hey, pay us.
Yes.
Right. So I think maybe why don't we just jump into Roberto's thoughts on or definition of what value is, unless you had anything else.
No, yeah. I'm excited to get into this conversation.
Okay, cool. Awesome. All right. So we'll start with kind of almost, he started when I asked him, okay, what does value actually mean to you? And his first response was like, it was all about extreme radical candor and transparency. In fact, he said transparency to an absurd degree.
Just that makes me uncomfortable, but in a good way.
It already makes us uncomfortable, right?
I know, yeah.
Yeah, and then he did dive into a lot of other characteristics, I think, of, content creators and entrepreneurs who give value in their content. But even as we were talking about what those mean, it kind of felt like it was wrapped up in this probably one overarching concept of extreme radical candor and transparency. And this is a really interesting conversation to be having at this time, because, even in a couple of episodes ago, we spoke about the feedback that we got from Dennis Yu on our organic content on the social media posts that we were doing. And, we always laugh, and now we use it as shorthand internally to be like, okay, let's be a little bit more heavyweight.
Stop doing lightweight stuff.
Yeah, because definitely some of the feedback was that we do tend to be on the lightweight side, which is kind of like, yes, it's our personality, because that's just we like to be fun and funny and things like that. But a part of me also thinks that that's also shying. It's us kind of shying away from this concept of extreme radical candor and transparency,
or just having a very because it's not that those things aren't true. It's just not bringing the other dimensions that are also true. Just kind of choosing the one dimension to show, which, as funny or as fun as as uplifting as it can be, again, just doesn't create that depth with your audience. So good. Very good thing to aim for.
Yeah. So there's kind of like a couple of things here that we're now, when we look
grappling with.
We are grappling with this, right? But this is important because, again, we're here to win the content game. And I think all of us, we're in it playing with you. We've kind of, had some coaches, some great conversations with great coaches to be like, okay, this is maybe where we can focus our game on right now, our training, like whatever it is. Because as I said in, I forgot what episode number it was, but, if you want to listen to the third episode in the series with Dennis Yu, we literally spoke about gosh, what do we speak about? We speak about a lot of things, but like, it was really about, we needed to lay the foundations of just like showing up to training, showing up to the game, just doing it consistently. But now it's time, I know definitely for us to level up, and leveling up means how do we become more heavyweight in our content? So how do we go deeper? And part of going deeper is actually what Roberto was talking about, which is this extreme radical candor and transparency, which if that is what value is, then not only are we, it's actually what we're doing then is we're actually providing more value to our audience.
Yes. And I think just on that point, as you were saying that, I think Roberto's invitation to us in bringing candor and transparency into because I think to your point, because value has been such a bandied about word, especially with content, that a lot of us, when we do it, we dehumanize ourselves.
100%.
We're very much about, like, let me just give you the answer for what you're looking for, which is great because people do love that. But it's very much like, either, we completely do not include ourselves as part of that at all, or we kind of that person in this ivory tower that has the value and it's just giving it to you versus truly building that human connection. And I think that's why like value content, it can be a bit of a cop-out sometimes, and I'm not necessarily calling someone out on this, even for us, because you're just like, okay, well, just give them the answers, this is what they're looking for, right? And then that will help me build credibility, and then to your point, it becomes very transactional.
And even like that is 100% how I think about it. I was going to say used to think about it, but actually unfortunately, I still do think about it in that way, where it's like, okay, well, let me give you the strategy. Surely the strategy is the value and the 3 steps to, implementing that strategy, right? Like if you listen to my old episodes of Grow My Podcast Show, and even the e-commerce podcast we had before that and things like that, it was all about, the episodes were like, we can start with a bit of a story to try to create that connection. But even then, it wasn't to the extreme radical candor and transparency level. It was just like, let's just tell a story that kind of ends to the point where you had that an epiphany, which will give you credibility, like, put you on a credibility pedestal, so that you can give the value, quote unquote, which is a strategy, 3 steps type thing. And, so I'm like, oh my gosh, I am so, so guilty of that. And I feel like actually all of the coaching, because that's what we get taught, right? Like this is actually how you create content. You start with your story, then I was
going to say, you took someone's value content to implement the value content.
Right? Yeah, seriously. And now I feel like interestingly, if you attended Uprising, Jenna, who's the CEO of Group Track CRM, spoke about her Uprising moment, and she's kind of in this phase now of just stepping back and looking at the industry at large, and it's really the coaching industry at large, and going like, this is a reckoning point for everyone in this industry. There was it was good times, right? From like when COVID hit, good times for the coaching industry, like huge growth. And then, all of these concepts got popularized around, this is how you give value, and it's all about the strategy, and it's all about your expertise, and it's all about, but now I feel like that's swinging back around to be like, actually, it's not, no one wants to listen to the person on the top of the mountain necessarily talking back at them and down at them, telling them what to do. It's like, no, we actually want to, listen to people, follow people who are extremely real about where they are right now, even if they haven't made it. Yeah.
I think this is actually, as you were talking, I realized, I think we all have to make a very specific decision at this point, especially if you've come from, I guess you were talking about that era of like, being coached into this, and to not take this as just another coaching moment where it's like, oh, okay, well now it's no longer about just giving value, it's about being transparent. And I think that can lead to a lot of performative transparency and performative candor versus like actual candor and actual transparency. So it's almost like if you find your brain going to, okay, this is a nice little how-to that Deidre is giving me right now. Okay, I need to now no longer just tell the story. I need to have an element of transparency. We again are taking this as the wrong lesson. I think you have to make a decision that this is not something we do, it's who we are. And if you're not quite there yet, then that's okay. That's okay. But that's the work we need to do, because like as every personal development person will tell you, we act in accordance with our values, even if you're people that say, I don't really have values, or I don't really have words that I put up on my screen or my screensaver, I'm not that guy. We all have identities, right? That we will do anything it takes to uphold. And to your point, you're someone that gives value, and then you just kind of go do it in the way that you think is the best. But now you're like, no, I'm a person who is always radically transparent as best as I know, and, you know, very, very candid about how I share it. Like, I am that person versus I do that because that's what's now going to get me cut through on the content side.
Oh man, and this is hard. Okay,
we're hard.
All right, we're gonna take a quick break, and when we're back, we're gonna actually start to talk about. I feel like it's gonna become a bit of a therapy session, to be honest. About,
but maybe tears. I don't know.
Yeah, like how we. And I don't mean how as in here's a 3-step how on how to, you know, but more like let's talk through how we actually bring this to life, because this is tough. All right. Anyway, we'll be back soon. Okay, so
got the answer yet?
I feel like that was a good 30 seconds to take a bit of a breath and be like, oh gosh, this is going to be incredibly uncomfortable. Okay, but for real, and we're not going to figure it all out right now, but this is kind of the starting point. This is us, I think, giving ourselves permission to like, how do we truly step into this place? And now there are going to be, like with everything, there are levels of it, right? So some people, as Bona said, might be like, this is not for me. Like, I am not going to be that extreme, radical, candor and transparency person. Like, you know, even the way that Roberto describes it, like for him, it could mean something else to some of us. And so those are the levels. For example, you know, Roberto mentions that he shares, you know, his like tax, you know, reports and things like it's a bit
to an absurd degree.
It's an absurd degree, right? Yes. And I'm like, okay, I don't think I'm there yet, right? And it may just be because with my upbringing, like, you know, it was always very like anything financial related was very much, you know, a guarded, well guarded,
shrouded in
secret. Yeah, yes, like that was just secrecy, you know, in the Asian culture, that was just the thing. So I just don't think I'm ready for that kind of extreme radical candor and transparency. So then, and some people also might be in the same boat, and that's okay. But some people might be like, actually, you know what? I have no issues with sharing my revenue numbers and my all of that.
I want to grow into that space.
Yeah, then awesome. Like that, you know, that's definitely a path that you can take, in because there is actually a lot of value in people seeing your journey from like rather than you just talking about it, actually showing the data behind it, right? So this is also a place for us to decide and give ourselves grace as well as to what we can be okay with and what is like, oh, like I'd love to be able to get to that point, but I just don't think that I can go like 0 to 100.
Yeah,
right at
and that's
moment.
okay too, because you're going to do it in another realm, I think. Because just as you were talking about that, one thing I reflected on, I think where the difference in transparency can come into it, or when you really know, I think you're being, you know, radically transparent, is if we use that example of like sharing numbers. I know that, you know, speaking of Uprising, Austin shared his story, which I really loved. And he spoke about, because he is very transparent on his social media about, you know, his numbers and kind of like, you know, he does regular updates in terms of follower numbers and, you know, revenue numbers and things like that. But what he said in Uprising, where he had that realization that, you know, recognition is important to him. Like, to me, that was a radically transparent and candid moment where he said, look, that might not be the popular thing to say because everyone's pretending like they're not driven by these things, and maybe people aren't. But I just know that I'm driven by this, and it does matter to me, no matter what people say. Yep. And that's why I share. To me, that means more, or it adds a level of depth to the numbers he's sharing, so that when I see the numbers he's sharing, I see that with a new light now. Yeah. I can see that it took him courage. It doesn't take him much courage to share his numbers, like it might do for you. Yes. But the fact that he went that extra step to say, the reason I do this is I've done a lot of self-work and I've realized this is important to me. Rather than just seeing this as another person who's gloating about their success, I see this as someone who's like, wow, you know, he wakes up every morning, he looks at these numbers, this is what juices him, and he's become vulnerable enough and candid enough and transparent enough to say, this is why I do this. Yes. Because this is me. Now I know this person better. I can see it took courage for him to say that. Yes. Because he didn't need to say that. And it can be unpopular for some people to say that, right? Yeah. Oh, I think that to me was like, oh, this is the difference. Yeah. Beyond the content we're sharing, it's what's almost like the reasoning behind it. It really, really helps, I think.
Yeah, that's like and this is the thing. My brain goes straight into like, oh, maybe we can create a framework out of this. Like, let's determine what are our drivers. Are you externally driven or internally driven? Okay, I'm going to stop doing that. Yes, exactly. I'm going to stop doing that. This is this is a problem. I think I need. It's an addiction. I need to. Okay, so I'm going to try to roll that back because I do want to like. And that might be a value. I'm not gonna like. I do actually think that would be a value to people.
Somebody note this down.
Yeah. Good idea. But I do want to because I want to really try to grapple with the hard value because you mentioned courage and that is actually also what Roberto mentioned in terms of that is all, like a driver value, right? It's like courage is valued and sacrifice is valued, and sometimes sacrifice can be I feel like courage and sacrifice are kind of like both one side of the same coin type thing, right? Because it's like you have to sacrifice two.
You're so on point with your almost there metaphors.
People know what I mean. People know what I mean.
You're very consistent. Yeah. Sorry. I ruined the moment you were saying they're two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, where like you kind of have to have courage to sacrifice, and you have to almost sacrifice yourself to find courage.
Yep.
Right? Yep. So it kind of almost doesn't surprise me like that Roberto went down that path because all of these things, even when I'm like, okay, how do we become extremely radical? I actually and transparent. It's like I kind of actually don't want to have this conversation because I know that it's going to take the courage that and it's hard.
Yes.
It's always hard whenever you have to step into something courageous, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that to that point, I think we all know what we're sacrificing in that moment. So the way that I know when we were talking about it before we hit the record button, courage and sacrifice is required in order to be the person that's radically, because I think people who are like transparent and candid, they don't each time, because there's levels to this, right? You might be really comfortable talking about whatever and then something else happens and now you want to talk about that. So it's an ongoing thing. You don't just then switch on and become a candid and radically transparent person. There's just more and more things to be transparent about or things you experience. But I think for us, it feels like not pressuring ourselves to a point to be like, that has to be the starting point. I think for us, the way we operate, at least with our content, is always going to be like, we will start with things we want to talk about, like topics we want to talk about.
Yes.
But almost there's an extra step now to say, okay, that's well and good. And normally we just tick that off to say, that's a valuable piece of content. Now people have the 3 steps to set up their virtual summits. But how can that, like, what is a part of that is, what else can we share about that?
Yeah.
That's going to actually make it relevant to someone who's a human versus just someone who's looking to rip content off the internet.
Yes.
And that's not always an easy question, but I think asking that question is the main thing, right?
Yeah.
Because you're like, okay, why am I even talking about this then in that case? Why, or I'm just promoting an event that I want people to come to. Like, why am I even hosting this event? Why am I talking about it? It's almost like, what is that internal, to your point though, like internal driver that either is getting you to do this, or you go, there is no internal driver. I'm just doing it
because I get told to, because it's again part of another 3-step framework.
Exactly. And then you just go, I'm not going to do it. And then you might do a radically transparent post about how you decided to stop doing this thing you've been doing for 3 years.
Yeah.
Because you had this moment with yourself.
Yeah.
I don't know actually, but it's almost like I think asking that question versus I know sometimes when we have these like epiphanies, we're like, oh my gosh, this is going to foundationally change how I do things.
Yeah.
We think we have to have a different starting point, and that's a little bit difficult sometimes.
Yeah, so my mind goes to like a couple of like different things even as you're talking, because when I reflect on Capshovians Live, one of the biggest pieces of feedback from someone who just absolutely loved the event was like he felt like he came out of that this sounds going to sound corny, like transformed in a way. Like he was like, it wasn't just like, yes, there were like a ton of expert guest speakers who, went into the how, and it was really, but it felt like a transformational event rather than just a come and learn things event.
Yes. Yeah.
Which to me was like, wow, like that's, I mean, like if that is an amazing piece of feedback, because if nothing else, like if we can actually help people step into the entrepreneur or the person that they want to be in order to succeed, then like that is a great job well done.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
Yep.
From our perspective. So my mind goes to, okay, well, what is almost like this word, this transformational word is kind of like going around in my brain to be like, is that, you know, for us to be extremely, you know, transparent, is it about, again, like the transformation, but then is it is it all about the journey, and not just the journey by way of this happened and this happened and this happened, but like the actual feelings and emotions and the data that brings those to life? Like, is that what being, you know, transparent to an absurd degree, could that is that, I guess it's more of a question, is that what it could look like for us?
Yeah,
even?
I think so, because, you know, for us, because we're not, you know, for example, we're not trying to teach people how to, in this example, put an event together. And in that case, it might be about publishing the journey more so. But to your point, if like, you know, like, why are we even doing this event? And I feel like now, because we haven't really spoken about this, we're speaking about it live.
Yep.
You know, like you were saying, if that's the emotion that you had, I wonder if then it's really about being radically transparent and candid about the fact that you're like, I never really, again, even the fact that you use the word corny, and I know you weren't calling the person corny, but you know, like you have that association with it. Even that, to me, is like an indicator to say,
interesting.
It makes me a little bit uncomfortable to be that. I want to put together a really great event where everyone does their homework and they're like, wow, this is the best information ever. Thank you for the strategy, right?
Yeah. Who can tell I'm very much more on the logical, rational side?
And then it almost makes you obviously very, very happy and validated.
Yeah.
But almost it feels like accidental that someone's had a transformation.
Oh, for sure.
And I know it wasn't just this person, because I was looking at I was like, wow, people really felt it. There were tears at the end of this.
Yes.
And again, you kind of are maybe shying away from stepping into that for a reason.
Yeah.
But then to your point, it makes sense to me now, because you're like, your comfort zone has always been, you know, you're the person almost invisibly, ideally, but unfortunately you can't, just gives value in that sense, because that's safe.
Yes.
You know, whereas this is like, oh, wow, like people are having like an emotional experience in something that I created. Again, like I don't want to necessarily go into that space, but that's what this event is. And now I'm feeling this resistance, but I sort of also now can't unsee it.
Yeah, it kind of... So Bono and I were having a conversation over breakfast, and to the point of extreme, you know, radical candor and transparency, like it was... I'm going through IVF right now, which I'm actually okay with talking about. I don't know if I'm okay with talking about this publicly, but whatever, it's out there now.
Too late.
And what was really interesting was, you know, I was saying that all through, it kind of felt like I hadn't really quite gone through the normal puberty
Hormonal experience
journey that most women, I guess, had to go through. So it feels like now at this point of time in my life, it's like it's all hitting me at once, like all the hormones and all
the tax bill of hormones.
Yeah, seriously, all of the mood swings and all of the feeling vulnerable and like just crying randomly. And I'm like, what in the world is happening? I kind of feel like it's like tying in. It's almost like timing is call it divine or whatever it is, but it's like, you know, we're talking about this one, and you're making some very very real, you know, observations of like how I generally approach. It's like very logical, it's very rational. This is my safe and comfort zone. Like I'm not really a vulnerable, like all of that, and it's kind of like tying in with the fact that like I probably really haven't been. Like I probably really didn't feel things to the depth that like maybe other. I'll say women, because men don't have feelings, right? That's what I hear.
You're going to get cancelled now. But it's okay. We said it in a fun voice, and you're laughing about it. And we're Australian, so it's fine.
Oh, okay. Well, then in that case, I'm just kidding.
Beep, beep, beep.
Yeah. No, but you know, so it's kind of like, okay, well, the more vulnerable and stuff that I'm actually almost physically feeling, it's like how do we almost like, or do we, I guess is also a question, like pair that with the how do we just start to break down the logical, rational parts that I've just always had more as my like safe zone.
Totally.
My comfort zone. Yeah.
I think you're right. Like it is divine or otherwise timing, because now, you know, again, you met these mentors or you had these conversations or coaches, whatever we want to call them, peers. at a time when I think you're like almost like physically in the sense open to receiving it, like truly receiving it versus as another framework. And I think we also need to be mindful that like, you know, all of that, like logic isn't a bad thing, like strategy, these are all really great things. It's just about like repackaging them. It could almost be the same content you would have created anyway. But to your point, you can't unfeel stuff now. So you're kind of like, oh, okay, I have this like feeling about it or this emotion about it. It almost reminds me of, you know, almost like a couple of creators in this space where, you know, we spoke about Leila Hormozi. I'm a big fan of her because of, you know, many things, but the way that she's kind of gone about this is almost like, because she has a very like, she's a hard ass, like for sure, and even the way she talks and all of that kind of stuff is it's very hard to fault the woman in terms of her logic and all of that stuff, but she speaks very freely about some of the emotional aspects of stuff, and then she also gives you a framework how to deal with it. But I think that's almost the freedom that people, because again, that's where it feels radically transparent, because when she did plastic surgery, for example, she didn't make a huge deal about it. She's also very clear to say, hey, I don't have I'm not doing it. There's no one that needs to come into to tell me I'm already beautiful and stuff. It's like, I think I'm actually really pretty. You know, again, it's women aren't allowed to say that.
Yeah.
Women aren't allowed to say that. It's like, but I want a nose job because I just feel like I want one and I can do it.
Yeah.
You know, and again, it doesn't have to be in this like super big way, you know, just for her to say, I already think I'm attractive. You don't need to tell me that. But by the way, there's also people on the internet who accuse me of being a man because of the way of my voice.
Oh,
right.
Okay,
and it's just like, and that actually made me feel terrible. And I'm like, oh wow, this person can be logical and, you know, all of that
and
kind
have
of stuff.
feelings as well.
And have feelings that she very easily expresses.
Yeah.
But they're still difficult things, if that makes sense. So I think letting ourselves have the paradoxes that we have is also really important. It's not like you're not just suddenly going to transform into this other person. You're still that person, but you have it like even you talking about this now, I think it. And the other person that comes to mind, sorry, now I'm like thinking, but like is, you know, the fitness person, Kayla Itsinas.
Oh yes,
yeah. Kayla.
It's science or it's
science. I actually don't know.
Yeah.
We're Australian. We should know. So sorry, Kayla. But I remember there was a phase when she was like, "Why are people asking me about my home and my beauty routine and my makeup routine and stuff? Like, I'm here to teach about fitness. Like, I'm not going to talk about that stuff." And then now she's evolved to like she does all of that again because she's like, I realize like that this is important to me. I actually really like doing my makeup, which you might not expect from someone who's like in that space, right? But she spoke, I think it was less about now I share makeup content. It was more about I've had this journey where I thought I had to be very, but now, you know, I don't mind admitting that I enjoy something superficial like makeup and I'm going to talk about it.
Right.
It was her sharing transparently the journey.
Yes.
As well as now she does do this additional content too. So I think it's almost that, like that's actually what people, and you don't have to share the journey like step by step.
No.
But these realizations, exactly like what you're doing now. Because I'm like, oh, like I've known you for a long time. We're very, very close. And to me, I'm still getting to know that, right?
Yes.
I'm like, because you're sharing it now.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, right. Okay. That to me is transparent and candid.
Yes.
There is a cost to you right now sharing this.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's debilitating, but I can see it takes courage.
Yeah.
And there's a sacrifice of your ego and there's a sacrifice of whatever else.
All the thing, yeah.
That I might not even realize is going on inside you. But then I can feel a liberation.
Yeah.
So it tells me that you're not doing it performatively.
Yeah.
Because you feel the relief almost.
Yeah. I'm going to start crying. No. So like, no, this is really interesting because, you know, even as you're, here comes a framework.
Step one. Step two? Or what did I do?
No, but like, you know, and this is just, I think it's hard actually to actually put a framework around this because the more, and this is probably how us as a coaching or like this solopreneur industry has come to this point of like, you know, almost a cookie cut template of what value is because like we do try to create frameworks around some of these things that actually you can't put a framework around it.
Yes. Yeah.
But there might not be a framework, but there might be considerations or questions or things that can help prompt some of this thinking. And you know, for me, even as you were talking, like one thing that stood out was actually talking about the duality because that is actually a very human thing that we forget is human. We sometimes, I don't know about anyone else, but I know for me, I'm like, oh, if I sense that there's like inconsistencies in like and that's the thing. I think consistency seems to be like a call it a value or something that it's just something that I've kind of always just relied on.
Yes,
I think.
looked for.
Yeah. And it's like it's actually the inconsistencies that make us human.
Totally.
Right. So even to the examples that you spoke about, it's like, well, like Layla can be this hard ass, but she can also, be this other person, and Kayla can be this fitness person, but she can also be this this quote unquote superficial, whatever. Like there are two. Like we're all multidimensional.
Yeah.
And I think part of being transparent is actually talking about that multidimensionality, and when we have a realization of one of those things opening up, because again, that's the other thing about being human, is that we're constantly growing and we're constantly finding new things out about ourselves, even if they're hobbies or interests or things that we like even at this stage, I'm like, I suddenly like things like olives, and which I used to hate before. Like I just could not stand them, but now it's like, and I always joke to Ash all the time that it's like he doesn't have to have an affair or like finds, because he's just married to someone who's just changes all the time. Okay, that's just that's a very extreme, but you know what I mean. Like, so I think it's like it's even that when you, maybe not the olives part, but like talking about when you make a realization, it's like, oh, actually this thing that maybe I actually judged other people or whatever about before, I actually kind of like, this is now also a thing that I enjoy, or this is also a part of me that I've unearthed.
Yes. It was interesting because Ryan Holiday was talking about this, where, one of the difficulties, unfortunately, of being like, I say, a public persona, take that what you will, is, especially if you have like you're like the person that takes a stance on something. And I think we all should, but it's like, strong beliefs loosely held, right? It's like you sort of, you rob yourself of the opportunity to be a person that changes their mind, heaven forbid.
Yes.
Or because, again, you're like crucified. And sure, there's like some extreme examples if you're like a really popular influencer, for example. But even as a regular human, we put ourselves up to that, up to those standards, and then everyone who's following you as part of your audience or, buys what you sell is also kind of putting themselves to that impossible standard, when really if we were all just human and shared actually I don't think I think this anymore. And the olives is a really good example, because maybe your palate, literally your intellectual palate has changed.
Yes.
But then you can be humble enough to say, I was a bit of a judgmental beep, because I didn't realize that this is what it was. And now, again, I'm not trying to turn this into and here's what I learned, the 5 things, but it's like, this is really what I felt. And I think there's just, people don't do that because, again, we're all incentivized, quote unquote, to be this person that has this belief or like shares this in this way.
Yes.
They're just, again, and we're not allowed to grow. Yeah. Which is weird because that's all we talk about.
Yes.
That's all we profess is growth.
Yeah.
But we make ourselves stagnant in that pursuit. Yeah. Because we're almost like, it costs us our ego to say, I used to think this, but now I think this. It's either not fully evolved or it is. And I may change my mind in another year's time. Yeah. I think we do it in bits and pieces.
Yes.
Again, when we have a strategy to sell.
Here's the new framework
that I will stick by forever.
Exactly. Yeah. This is what you need to do.
Exactly. And I think especially for women, even I find myself having these moments where I'm like, because I think to me that makes me think, oh, does that make me look like I'm scatterbrained?
Yeah, or like wishy-washy, or I don't,
exactly.
For
or
sure.
I flip-flop.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, again, like strong beliefs loosely held. I think it takes a lot of courage. And this is when it comes to content creation, it's something that we have to be mindful of, I think, is now in going, well, in sharing this, it doesn't have to be perfect, but how do I go that layer deeper versus just like sharing for sharing's sake?
Yeah.
Now I am this wishy-washy person because now I just keep talking about all these different things sporadically, but I'm going to do the hard work to join the dots for my audience.
Yes.
To share the epiphany, because that's going to be my work and that's going to be the value, right? So that they can digest it.
Yes.
They don't need to read, an essay of me having all of my streams of consciousness, but it's like, you've done the work to try to understand that and put that out there.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so unfortunately, there is no 3-step framework to how to be to provide value through extreme radical candor and transparency.
Does Roberto have one? No.
No, but maybe in like a few weeks' time, we'll come back. I'll be like, here's a 3-step framework to how you just. Okay, but like just. If you are listening to this, first of all, we apologise if it was a little bit all over the place. But second of all, thanks for hanging with us. But third of all, I would actually encourage, I'm going to hold us accountable to creating content, definitely on social media that embodies this. I mean, it might not be perfect because that's, we're on this journey as well. But if you do want to follow, if you're not following my account, so Deidre Shen, either on Facebook or LinkedIn, definitely go do that and just help hold us accountable to this, to actually living in and sharing in this way, because this is, I think, for us, the new frontier of like how we go from lightweight to heavyweight is, through, funnily enough, giving value, which we always thought we were, but this is another lens of value that we want to step into. So yeah, definitely go do that and come be on the journey with us. My name is Deidre Shen.
I'm Bona Rai.
And as always, stay intelligently lazy.